And the Linda Sun trial shows how the Chinese regime seeks to exert its control outside of its borders and around the world. With us now is a man who is suffering under that agenda. Youngdoung Tenzin is a Tibetan bravely standing up to the CCP that's despite sanctions, death threats, and great personal loss. He's been targeted by the regime despite the fact that he lives all the way on the other side of the planet in Canada. Youngdoung, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us. Sir, you've been forced to cut off your contact with your family in Tibet. Why?
Thank you, Paul, for having me on the show today. So I'm Tibetan Canadian citizen here in Canada, but my story is a living proof how China's transnational repression is reached here in Canada. So I was born in Tibet, that has been illegally occupied by China, and Tibetan people repressed by China over 7 decades. So China does not want the world to know what is happening inside Tibet. For myself, in exile, when I was 11 years old, I came in exile by crossing the Himalayan mountains to seek freedom. And since then, I haven't seen my parents for more than 25 years. And today I'm speaking as a Tibetan Canadian who has experienced China's transnational repression in firsthand, not in Lhasa, Tibet, not in Beijing, but here in Canada. So China sanctioned me because they want to suppress my voice. I have been working in Canada advocating human rights and freedom for Tibetans because inside Tibet, across Tibet, Tibetan scholars, writers, singers, and environmental activists and language advocates were detained and disappeared. So China wants to suppress not only Tibetans, Uyghur, Hong and Chinese democratic community abroad because they don't want the world to see what is happening at ground reality.
Youngdoung, how much extra pressure did they start putting on your family after they learned about your peaceful activism?
Yes, so I'm just ordinary Canadian citizen. I just advocate for human rights and freedom in Canada. However, I was sanctioned on 23rd December 2024 by Chinese government, along with 19 Canadian citizens who are associated with Canada-Tibet Committee and Uyghur Human Rights Project. So this sanction was not a symbolic, it was a direct attempt to repress my voice. So after sanction, I have been receiving death threat and was intimidations across social media. For one horrific incident, I received a message from a claiming Chinese consulate officer based in Pakistan that they're threatening my families in Tibet if I do not stop my advocacy work in Canada. They sent me information in detail about my relatives. That was horrific. That was most horrific experience ever had in my life. But instead of fear, the sanction provided me clarity that my voice in Canada matters. I speak for truth for Tibet and human rights, which has been very powerful, threatening government like China. So their intimidation was to repress myself, but it strengthened me, my determination, my courage to speak up, to continue advocacy for Tibet. But I had the most difficult, most painful decision that I disconnected from my family in Tibet to protect them, and also sacrifices my relation to continue to advocacy for Tibet, because I know that more than 160 Tibetans have immolated. They called return of His Holiness Dalai Lama. They called freedom for Tibet. They called independence for Tibet. So it's my moral responsibility and my moral obligation to stand up for them.
So, Youngdoung, you cut off contact with your family. You were afraid for their safety after the embassy sent you their contact details to warn you, we know where your family are. Obviously, you said it was the most heartbreaking moment in your life. But for you personally, last year before you spoke at the International Criminal Court at The Hague in the genocide case against Xi Jinping very bravely, you got death threats, but you went ahead with it anyway and gave your testimony. Why? You knew the regime was bluffing?
Yes, because the Tibetans inside Tibet, especially the younger generations, they are working hard for the Tibetan cause. And Tibetans inside Tibet, they were repressed. For example, a young Tibetan singer, very popular Tibetan singer, in July 2025, he sang a song in honoring the 90th birthday of His Holiness Dalai Lama, but he was disappeared. He was detained. He was repressed. His 1-year-old child and his wife left alone without answer, without injustice. So just imagine if it happened with anyone, Canadian or American artist or singer, so how the world will react. So this is sad reality in Tibet. And also over 1 million Tibetan children, especially some of them are 5 years old, were forced in Chinese boarding school. They are separate from parents, banning Tibetan language. So Chinese try to eradicate the Tibetan identity and culture. So now Tibetan is facing the most intense repression since 90s, the very existence of Tibetan people and identity and our culture. So that's why it's my responsibility to stand up against China. So I went to the Hague to attend and testify in genocide case against President Xi Jinping, despite I was threatened because Tibetans have sacrificed their precious life. It's my responsibility.
It's very noble and very brave of you. And I think what the regime has been doing in Tibet now for decades is just unacceptable and just terrible. And to think here, now, what you're talking about in Canada and here in the States, we've been reporting on the tactics the regime has been using against other groups like the Falun Gong, Shenyun Performing Arts. It's very sophisticated. This isn't something that's disorganized. They're using legal warfare, propaganda, and just like in your case, threats and actual violence. It's just incredible. Were you surprised when the CCP's transnational repression arrived at your door in Canada?
Yes, I was shocked because I just came to Canada to seek the freedom, So I thought I can advocate for human rights and freedom because which is within the Canadian values and within the Canadian rules law. I was really shocked. But now Canada openly acknowledge and recognize that China engaged in foreign interference and transnational repression on Canada's soil. It was widely reported that Chinese authorities in Canada, they are operating so-called police stations. And also it's widely reported that some of elected representatives, member of parliament in Canada, were influenced by Chinese authority. But as public, we do not know who are them. And also for Tibetans, Mongols, Uyghurs, and Chinese democratic communities in Canada, transnational repression is daily reality, including like massive civilians and community event, and also at the protested and was online threatened, and also pressure on family back home. So it's not only intimidate and individual communities, but also it's undermined the Canadian democratic system. So, however, in 2024, Canadian Parliament has passed a Bill C-17 to counter the foreign interference and transnational repression, but government of Canada has failed to implement it. For example, one example, why has the foreign interference transparency registry has not established? Why the Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, not to prioritize foreign interference and transnational repression in the discussion with President Xi Jinping when he met him on 31st October 2025. So I demanded our Canadian government to implement Bill C-17 fully.
They should. Transnational repression, Youngdoung, is very much a reality. And when Americans hear and Canadians hear that the CCP and these authoritarian regimes are doing things in their own countries, they're disgusted. And they should be. And the governments, they should really make a stand to the regime and Xi Jinping. Because for people like yourself and others who are targeted unfairly after coming here for safety and to try and get away from these regimes, it's terrible, and we do. Thank you for coming on and highlighting it. Youngdoung Tenzin, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks so much.